protagonists wore armor and carried a sword across sunlit lands and trudged through rain-soaked rainforests. One of them longed to be an adventurer and lived desperately on that path. After 40 years, he had accumulated baggage. Rain kept falling as the man raised his hand to his face to show the burden of a weak body and a worn-out heart. He lifted the sword that caught the light. Still, he kept doing his best as an adventurer. Then one day something happened. A dragon shot the man into the air, pain on his face as his bags, backpack and sleeping bag scattered in all directions. A calm day lay over the landscape. Clouds drifted across the sky. A village sat by the fir trees, and mountains rose on the distant horizon. A nearby tree cast a shadow across the closed window, and a small bird perched on a branch and chirped. A hand turned the doorknob, and bright light spilled through the crack into the room, making the dark-haired young man rub his eyes and squint against the sun. The boy and his sister's mother were about to leave, but promised to return soon and asked the main character to take care of Leela. Scared, the little girl clung to her brother and tugged at his shirt, while Arito smiled, said goodbye, and wished his mother a happy day. Born in this village 5 years ago, he and his sister, who was still holding on to him, went into another room. A boy sat on the bed while his sister asked him to read a book. They were a family of 4, consisting of him, his father, his mother, and his younger sister Leela. The young man opened the book, noticed a knight illustration, and traced it with his fingers. Nearby, the girl rubbed her eye and looked at the book in confusion, and when she asked the boy who it was, he did not answer. He examined the knight's armor and sword closely. That was his dream for the future. Arito's eyes clouded over as he nodded. Sure, he knew his dream, but it began to change. The boy suddenly grew up, and the room was empty, with no sister Leela, only emptiness. He sat alone, legs crossed, head bowed. His tired expression revealed nothing as he stared into space, fingers twitching slightly. The hero snapped out of a stupor, his mind filling with questions about where he was and what was happening, and sure his luggage was still with him. He feared this might be a final shock before death. He lifted his head, horror on his face, as he realized a dragon stood before him. A huge creature with powerful wings, horns, and long claws sat opposite, calmly looking down and squinting a little. His hand went for his sword, but nothing was nearby. Turning in confusion, the hero realized he had no weapon. The dragon stood motionless, as if waiting. Hopelessness hit the young man. He knew it was over because the dragon had just ended his life. Memories of that day's horrors flooded his mind. A shiver ran through him as he met the dragon's gaze with defiance, convinced it planned to eat his soul. Silently, the hero looked at the monster as if asking something, and the monster seemed a little puzzled. The dragon suddenly spoke, apologized, and said with regret that she hadn't noticed the man while she was chatting with the wind spirits. The man was very surprised. The dragon sank into despondency and said she felt no pity for those who had challenged her, blaming it all on her own carelessness. She offered him part of her power and told him to start a new life. A magical creature locked eyes with the man and told him she was a holy dragon, granting his soul the attribute of light. An invisible force seemed to fling the man backward. He disappeared while a lone leaf hovered against the cloudy sky. The boy rushed away so fast he could not be seen. Only the grass swayed in the wind. The fair-haired knight lay alone in the meadow with a sword, a shield, and a bag at his side, resting his head on his hands as he thought that 40 years had passed since that moment. After reincarnation, he gained the light attribute, kept his previous fire attribute, and gained a new wind attribute. The young man realized that having all 3 traits was rare. More attributes let him use more weapons and items and gain power beyond his status, so he lifted his sword above his head to block out the sun. A sword's shadow fell across his face, and he looked at it sadly before suddenly jumping up. Watching the valley and the leaves swirl in the wind, he realized he hadn't made it in time after all. This time the knight was sure he would become known as an adventurer. He had many hopes for the future, but nothing worked out and he spent 40 years homeless. By then it was too late to think about it. Standing up, he rested his hand on his numb legs. A man gathered his things and left. Only the mountains remained behind him. He thought the city was still far away and decided to find a place to spend the night when a bird flew very close at incredible speed and caught his attention. A flock followed the bird and terrified the traveler because he could not tell what it was. When he looked back, he was stunned. A huge dragon swooped down from the sky, cutting through the air toward him. The man couldn't believe what was happening and stayed frozen in place. Horror and the dragon's reflection were frozen in his eyes. The knight opened one eye, trying to figure out what was happening and where he was. Nothing was around him again, and he floated in the air, confused, legs crossed. The collision caused no pain, and a familiar feeling returned. He had been here before, so he scanned the room, looking for something that might catch his eye. A dragon appeared suddenly right in front of him. Lying opposite, he looked off to the side and did not notice the man. The traveler recognized the dragon that had knocked him down moments earlier. Not sure what to do, he looked at the dragon and waited for an answer. The dragon wept bitterly, wiped her tears with a claw, and confessed she was very sorry because she could not imagine a man in such a wilderness, and the knight stood with his head raised and watched this revelation in shock. Surprised that such a huge dragon had a female voice, he heard her say that if he were her enemy, there was no point in expecting forgiveness, and she admitted she'd gotten carried away during the flight. Asking forgiveness, she knew it wouldn't be enough, so she gave him some of her power. The traveler looked exhausted when he heard he would have to be reborn. The dark dragon imbued his soul with darkness as the man watched in silence. The dragon beat its wings and rose from the ground while night still hung in the air. You wondered whether anyone had ever been born with all 5 traits at once. After reincarnation, as promised, he received the darkness attribute and also gained the water attribute. 3 attributes from the young man's past lives stayed intact, leaving him with 5 attributes. Those around him admired the young man, were impressed by his abilities, and their expectations kept growing. This marked the birth of a genius, on par with heroes from every age. Uninterested in girls, the young man spent all his time training. Staring at his sword, he thought he couldn't be a hero despite having 5 attributes and working so hard. That night felt certain everything would work out this time. Back in the same place, alone with the dragon, he felt emotions rising until it became too much. The hero thought the 2 incidents might be a coincidence, but that was to be expected, and he found himself in the same situation again. The traveler's patience ran out, and with no polite words left, he began to swear. The dragon watched him silently. Rubbing her face with a paw, the dragon thought being shot down by another dragon was rare, but 3 times could be a curse. She apologized for being careless during the flight. All night he thought about finally finding a dragon with a proper voice. As with the others, she promised to give him a piece of her power. This time they wished him a happy life. The hero clenched his fists. The chaos dragon appeared before him. As one of the wings of the 3 divine dragons, she granted his soul the power of chaos and then slowly began to evaporate. The man watched this oddly, also turning faceless as if dissolving into space, and now he had all the attributes. So Arido had 4 main attributes available to him. From the first 2 dragons, he gained the light attribute, which occurs in about 1 in 100,000 people, and the darkness attribute, which only a few demihumans have. The last dragon granted him the chaos attribute, a trait found only in monsters and objects, and it cannot appear in humans or demihumans. His attributes were like silk, and with them all he should have gained power comparable to a god. Sitting on the bed, Arido suddenly said he didn't think that was true. Nearby, Leela was startled by her brother's reaction, jumped up and stared at him with her mouth open. She waited in silence for her brother to explain and watched as he threw his head back, and lamented that after 3 lifetimes he'd learned, he had very low basic abilities and little potential to grow. These matters are decided within the soul. As the young man mourned his past failures, his sister had already calmed down after the sudden cry and was drifting off to sleep. Arido studied the night picture in the book, and though everything seemed predetermined, he wouldn't give up his dream of becoming an adventurer. Baring his teeth and furrowing his brow in anger, he was determined not to let it happen again. The boy pictured his past lives lined up, and in each one he wanted to be an adventurer. Cursed and destined to die by a dragon, he is determined to become an adventurer and succeed. The previous night had shown him that reality was merciless and that he lacked talent. Sullen, he looked at his hands, unsure what to do next. The boy clenched his fists tightly. Arido jumped out of bed and shouted that he would become an item enhancement master, which frightened his sister again. The brother ignored her and stared into the distance, aware of his own weakness. He said he would fill the gap with objects that way. Little Leela still did not understand and rubbed her eyes in confusion. She looked at her brother. Relying only on powerful gear could cost him his life like the last 2, such as the fire sword that boosts strength and the water armor that regenerates itself. Lost in thought, the boy didn't notice anything around him as he flipped through a panel and remembered wind, earth, light, and darkness. He had every attribute, including the final one, chaos, a rare trait that opened entirely new possibilities. Arido was lost in thought, and his sister was nearly asleep. Determined to master his final skill, the young man wanted more than strength. He aimed to craft things only he could make, like his own armor, weapons, and other gear. Night hung over the split sword. He decided to use his abilities and become an adventurer, his face serious and his eyes full of determination. Little Arito stood in the middle of the room, smiling and gazing dreamily into the distance, hoping adventurers were popular with girls. Leela didn't hear her brother and was already asleep. Two dragons hovered in the sky, both froze in midair, facing each other. One of them swooped down and let out a loud roar. Then he unfurled his wings. Huge paws tipped with long claws almost touched the ground as the dark dragon prepared to land after its flight. The other dragons stirred when he appeared. One dragon nodded, squinting slightly. The second light dragon watched the newcomer silently. The latecomer apologized for being late and asked how long they would have to wait. They said they had arrived here only recently. The lightest dragon pressed her paw to her face, remembering it had been about 6 months ago. The dragons began a friendly conversation as they waited for the third, and one of them had been asleep the whole time. The dark dragon was happy and suggested the lightest dragon had lost weight, and the saint welcomed the remark. At the meeting, the second dragon said she had called them together to see if any of them had ever had to end someone's life and then reincarnate them. Both dragons remembered the young man they'd accidentally knocked over. The saint said that if she remembered correctly, it was about 80 years ago, and she later passed her attribute to that man. Darkness sank into memory and remembered that 40 years had passed since she met the knight, and that she had given him her attribute. The third dragon told the others that the same thing had happened to her recently, and she had given a human the attribute of chaos, and all three dragons sat facing each other in silence, thinking about what had been said. Doubt filled the saint as she wondered whether it was the same person and if it was a coincidence. The chaos dragon nodded, but the third dark dragon refused to believe it and assumed they were joking. The saint could not see how she had ended up with such bad luck. Kia suspected the young man might be cursed, though that was unlikely, and curious she looked into his soul and found he had problems before his reincarnation. Darkness and Sint looked at the chaos dragon with concern because they did not understand what problems she was talking about. The third dragon lowered her head, her eyes sad and full of sympathy, and told him the man had been given weak soul traits and very little potential to grow. Chaos concluded that the three lives were very similar. Her companions were speechless and stunned by what they heard. The saint felt the situation was terrible. She believed giving him the attribute of light would be enough. The chaos dragon said she had done the same. She insisted the gathered crowd had taken the life that night and forced him to live 2 more unhappy lives. The saint replied that they could not know whether that was true. Chaos agreed, but also knew the man had all 7 traits, so pride could grow and the chance of an early death would rise. Frowning and determined, the saint said that because they were connected to God, they could not let such an outrage go unanswered. The dark dragon said everything was correct, but she did not understand what they were supposed to do because in their whole lives they could give someone only 1 gift. She still thought it was technically 1 life, but since the boy had been reborn, he was counted as the start of a new life, so she could not think of anything to give him now. She knew Chaos had already given the young man her attribute. The saint said they couldn't give the boy anything yet, and that Chaos was an attribute people shouldn't have. It had many advantages, and she thought that was enough. Darkness asked what to do now. The light dragon said she would think about it and advised waiting until the newborn boy grew up. Worried, the dark dragon had to decide whether their stats were too high. They must become human, but if the dragons do this, they will not be able to regain their traits for a while. Darkness and Saint talked about visiting the human city again after so long because it would be fun, while the Chaos dragon watched silently from the side. Chaos felt crushed when the dragons forgot her, and she began to consider breaking the rule just this once. Alone, she became increasingly lost in thought. Arito sat in the garden with his arms crossed, his sister beside him watching a butterfly, and he thought that after the dragons had reincarnated him 3 times, he had gained all 7 attributes in his 4th life. Leela reached out to catch the butterfly fluttering nearby. Arito chuckled because he knew he lacked talent but had decided to become an item enhancement master. The young man saw the panel showing his attributes and realized he had to hide them from everyone. Memories of disappointments from his past life still haunted him and could overwhelm him now, because if people around him recognized him, they would call him a genius, and that would ruin all the boy's plans. He ignored Leela, who kept trying to catch the butterfly and thought he was actually pleased, while he stared into the distance. Beneath a wide, spreading tree whose crown let the sun through, the brother and sister sat while Arito looked at the village ahead, the mountains, and the endless sky, admiring the vastness. The boy exhaled with a smile, glad he was born in this village, because people who judged others rarely came here. The main character had already decided who he would become. He thought about what to do next. A butterfly that had caught his sister's eye landed on his hair. Leela leaned on his shoulders and reached for it, but it flew away. Arido picked up a small stick and began drawing on the ground. To become a master at enhancing objects, he first needed to learn the necessary skills. He drew a diagram in front of him. One of the blessings from the ancient deities was the skill system. It let people collect experience points and turn them into skills, and the points needed for each skill varied by person. Pausing, the boy smiled broadly, happy because he knew that in the future he wanted to become a master of enhancing objects. The master introduced himself and told Arido he needed 1,000 points to reach his goal, 2,000 for a D rank, and 3,500 for a C rank. Arido stared at the master with wide eyes. The speaker said B rank required 7,000 points, A rank 15,000, and S rank 45,000, and the young man believed his compatibility was good because without it he would need many more points for the skill. To work professionally with objects, he needed at least a C rank. He practiced with pebbles, estimating it would take about 6,500 points to reach that rank. Skill points will steadily increase in everyday life as well. The house door opened slightly. The boy's mother looked out, called his name, and asked if they had sorted the herbs. The brother and sister picked up baskets of herbs from the ground and handed them to her, and the mother thanked them. Ordo thought his points would go up if he knew what was happening. Leela went into the house while her brother stayed outside to warm up, and he figured that by age 10 he would get the first skill, and by 15 raise it to D rank. At this age, he would go to the city, train for a few years to reach C rank, and once independent, use all his attributes to improve his skills. His goal was to upgrade it to the highest S rank, because that would start his path as an adventurer. This was his ideal plan for the future. While lost in thought about it, someone suddenly greeted him and asked if anything was bothering him. A beautiful young girl with long blonde hair apologized for speaking to him so suddenly. Dressed in a beautiful outfit, she had a necklace at her throat and a cloak draped over her shoulders. A breeze lifted the leaf-shaped hairpin with its tassel as it swung in her hair. Arido held his breath, unable to look away from the girl. His heart pounded. Noticing the man was lost in thought, the stranger shared her thoughts, and that made her interested. Panicking, the boy waved his hands, denied anything had happened, and said he was only imagining a perfect future. The girl propped her head on her hand, looked at the main character with concern and called him a poor thing, believing the future was foggy and unpredictable, and Arido tried to understand why she would say that to a 5-year-old child. Confused, he looked at the girl with her long hair in a braid as she reached toward him and wondered what was wrong with her. Without warning, the stranger hugged him and pulled him close. Arido had no time to understand and did not resist. Stroking his head, she told him he would be fine now and in the long term. Sweat beaded on the boy's face and hands. He had no idea what was happening. The girl kept hugging him while the young man tried to understand the strange situation. Trying to calm himself, he wondered why he got this reward. No one asked the question. The boy stayed silent, and the stranger suddenly said that divine dragons can bless only once in a lifetime. Holding him in her arms, she looked at the child with sympathy and said that now that he had been reborn, things were different and told him to live a happy life this time. She said it was a small gift from her, but the boy still did not understand what she meant. With her eyes closed, she smiled and told him to forget it, because their meeting was like a bubble that would disappear as it rose. Orido closed his eyes and listened as the girl, holding his head in her hands, wished him sweet dreams. Moments later, he woke up in the meadow, his hair messy, his eyes wide, and drool running from the corner of his mouth. The boy pushed himself up on his hands and looked around, trying to figure out how he had gotten there. Rubbing the top of his head, he tried to remember what he'd been doing. He was sure he'd been helping his mother and then met someone, a blonde girl with a braid popping into his head. He suddenly remembered he was crafting a perfect plan for the future. Checking the panel, he realized he didn't have enough points to unlock the skill yet. 100,101 appeared on the panel. The boy reached toward the screen and clenched his fist, saying he had finally passed 100 points. Then something stopped him. Listing the numbers on the panel in the order they appeared, he realized with glee that he had made a mistake. This time his account had more than 100,000 points. Millions of questions buzzed in his head as Arido felt stunned and could not understand how or where he had earned so many points in a single day, so he took a breath, calmed himself, and tried to sort his thoughts. At first he thought it was all a dream, wondered how he'd managed to fall asleep at the side of the road, and decided to go home to rest. Dawn arrived and the sun rose instead of the moon. Standing alone near his porch, she was in no hurry to go inside. With 100,103 points in his account, the boy stared in silence, unable to understand how it was possible or to imagine it. Having earned more than enough points, the former knight went to the church to learn the skill. looked inside as light shone through the windows, and found the church empty, not even the priest present. A hooded figure sat in one of the very front rows. A boy tiptoed past a sleeping old man, careful not to wake him. Arito found a book that would let him learn the skill alone. Knowing a priest was normally required, he took a risk and slid his fingers across the panel. A soft sound came from it. Turning around, he looked at the hooded man to check if he was awake. Only he could see the status, though others could see similar offers. Returning to his work, the young man first had to acquire the skill. A panel window asked if he wanted the skill to enhance items for 1,000 points and offered 2 options. Arito hovered his finger over the yes option. Fear stopped him and the world went still. A sound came from behind him. The protagonist turned, afraid the hooded man had woken, but after a moment only the man's snoring could be heard. The young man watched silently. Exhaling, he felt a rush of excitement, and since it seemed there was no danger, decided to continue what he had started. A cell on the panel let him enhance items. Determined to improve his rank, listing what he had, he reached the letter A. At last, the panel displayed the top S rank for item enhancement. Pausing for a moment, the boy felt delighted at the thought that, as a 5-year-old, he would learn to enhance high-ranking items. His plan for the future was interrupted by an old man's voice from behind. Surprised it was already morning, he realized the man could spot Arito at any moment. The young man felt horrified and knew he had to run. A loud voice praised Arito's talent, making the boy flinch and drawing Leela's attention as she stood beside her brother. At 10, Arito helped his uncle Tom, a dwarf, improve farming equipment. But when Tom said it would be rare to find a dwarf who kept chasing his dream into old age, Arito disagreed and thought his uncle said the same thing to everyone. Uncle described gnomes as a people who dream of making magnificent things from scratch, and the boys smiled politely, while one boy wondered how many times Uncle had told the story. Uncle Tom knew they weren't the sort to take up someone else's work and start from scratch, and he just wanted to make a magnificent outfit. Everyone knew even dwarves needed a lot of time and effort to make items from scratch. As a result, he left the Dwarven village to become an item crafter, practiced at the famous workshop from time to time, but failed because he had only one attribute. The dwarf said he had reached a barrier he could not overcome by effort alone when Arito's sister, still chasing butterflies, rushed past him at incredible speed. At last the little sister reached her goal. The insect was in her hands. The dwarf began to curse, calling her a dangerous little monster. Leo froze in fear, and her brother, smiling, denied the old man's words. Confused, the boy wondered why you could not strengthen an object multiple times with the same attribute. Then he slightly scolded his sister for her prank, and the little girl became completely despondent. Uncle Tom propped his head on his hand, grinned at Arito's suggestion, and wished it were that easy. The gnome told the boy he could not strengthen a single object forever. He tapped the wooden stick he held. He added that you could not just take a stick and apply the earth attribute hundreds of times until it matched steel. They learned that each object has a certain number of slots that can hold attributes. It is known that the number of slots depends on an item's quality, and even when 2 items are made from the same material, different parts can have different numbers of slots. With experience and knowledge, he concluded, one could tell how many times an item could be strengthened. The boys had long since fallen silent and watched the storyteller. Arito argued it could be determined easily if one had the appraisal skill. Uncle Tom looked at the young man, surprised by what he had said. He disagreed and corrected him, saying appraisal is a skill that reveals a person's or object's status and all available enhancements, but it does not show the number of slots. Leo said their knowledge and experience were very important. The gnome coughed, admitting he had cheated when he claimed to have a master's intuition. Tom grinned broadly, crossed his arms, and said that there was, however, one way. Arito could hardly believe what he heard and was delighted, while his little sister waited silently for the rest of the story. The old man lifted his index finger and said every master who enhances objects wants this skill. It is called analysis. A narrow stream cuts through the middle of the meadow and forms a small waterfall, its soft murmur filling the air. Standing in the same meadow and looking into the distance, the boy said analysis is a skill that can reveal the true nature of a person or object, which simple evaluation cannot recognize. Someone's slippers lay in the tall grass. The protagonist crouched down, picked them up, and assumed someone had dropped their shoes. Lifting the slipper higher, he opened the panel and realized he could take them home to try to strengthen them. Arito quickly gave up the idea because he didn't know how many strengthening slots it had, looked at the find for a while, then tossed it aside without regret, and said he wished he knew that information. He lay on the grass with his hands behind his head, staring at the sky. Thoughts swarmed in his head, and he believed he could figure it out by careful analysis. He closed his eyes to steady the rising anger and frustration. Something stood between him and the skill he really wanted. Uncle Tom said analytical skill is rare and hard to learn or gain unless you are born with it. He made it clear that, unlike other skills, it cannot be learned in the church. It can only be obtained by finding an extremely rare artifact or by completing ancient divine trials. Arito realized this skill was very hard to acquire, which made it even more valuable. With S-rank item enhancement and analysis skill at the same time, he would have nothing to fear as an item enhancement master. The main character felt so inspired by the idea that he jumped up and announced he had made up his mind. His new goal was to learn the skill. Standing up, he picked up his bag from the ground, and not knowing how to learn the skill, decided to begin by gathering information. Shouting a battle cry, the boy took one step, heard a voice behind him, and stumbled. The voice said his older sister had arrived and asked if the hero was in any trouble. Arito believed everything was fine until he met the stranger and turned to see who had disturbed him. A sweet girl with a pendant and hair ornaments smiled at him and assured him he could tell his sister everything, convinced he really had problems. Stunned, the young man stared at the stranger and could not say a word. Her beauty stunned him, but something was troubling him. Then his eyes widened and he grew even more frightened. The guests moved in close and loomed over the young man, and she asked, surprised, where he had gotten 27,000 points. The girl leaned in and, beyond what had been said moments earlier, saw that Arito had upgraded rank items and wondered whether he had beaten her to it, while the boy remained silent. Silence stretched between them, and the young man wondered how she could know so much, horrified that she might be able to judge him. The girl thought for a moment and asked the guy whether she had understood him correctly, that he wanted to become a master of enhancing objects, and he confirmed she was right, so she smiled and offered a solution to the situation. Reaching out, she kissed him. Arito froze and did not react at all. Stunned, he could not make sense of what was happening. She smiled and thanked him. Watching the main character closely, she waited for his reaction to what had happened. Stress made him stutter, but he still managed to ask why the stranger had done it. His mind blank, and she laughed, saying it was just a gift for him. Smiling and waving at him, she said his last life had not been successful, but she hoped he would be happy in this one. Arito grew more and more confused, his mind clouding, and he could not follow what she was saying, while the guest kept talking and asked them to forget about their meeting. With a finger to her lips, she asked them to keep it a secret. Arito dropped his hands to the ground, shaking. A white-winged butterfly landed on the young man's hair, waking him and causing him to open his eyes, frown and squint, then rub his eyes as he wondered what kind of glare he saw, and the butterfly fluttered away. Propped on his elbows, the boy looked around to figure out where he was, clutched his head as memories of how he had helped returned, then grew tired, and the sequence of events slipped from his mind. Arito noticed the slippers nearby and picked them up, remembering he had wanted to reinforce them, but could not because he did not know the number of slots. Sitting down, he crossed his legs, opened the panel, and swept his finger across it. If he'd had the analysis, he would have known exactly how many slots there were. Without that information, he decided to try to strengthen them. Then he noticed something. Slots with the exact number appeared on the screen. The hero nodded, remembering this was how it should have looked. Arito realized the slots should not be visible on his panel. Tossing his slipper aside, he scanned the panel when a notification sounded. The cell he'd been longing for appeared before his eyes, and his hand froze. Having gained the skill of analysis, the protagonist stared at it in silence, unable to believe this was happening. Looking ahead, the boy tried to take it all in. There was no explanation for what had happened while he slept. Fear filled him. He realized the skill could not have appeared on its own. Looking back at the slippers he had thrown away moments earlier, an unwelcome thought crossed his mind, but he still wanted to be sure. Reaching for his slippers, the boy decided this was a good chance to test this skill. The panel showed a range of details, including the item's performance, magic power, and effects, and at the top it displayed the name Holy Slipper with the caption Holy Walk. Everything was happening for real, he realized. The panel showed 2 rows of slots, and the number of boosts matched how many times he had boosted. On closer inspection, he noticed that when the late attribute was strengthened, an effect called Holy Walk appeared, and Arito did not know what it meant. Leela appeared behind her brother, crouched down, and asked what he was doing. He was so deep in thought, he almost automatically said he was mastering the skill of analysis, but he caught himself and stopped. Arito shuddered, closed the panel, turned around abruptly, and asked his sister what she was doing there. She said he had disappeared, so she went to look for him. Arito understood, apologized, and thanked her, and Leo beamed, smiling brightly. He decided to check the analysis later, and the boys joined hands and went home, where the little girl said they would eat stewed meat, which made both brother and sister very happy. Outside the window, the top of a nearby tree was visible as the day ended. Arito sat on the edge of the bed, exhaled, and wiped his head dry with a towel. Finally alone, he could figure everything out and opened the panel to examine the holy slippers, the missing part of HP, and the effect of the holy walk. A system window popped up, saying that wearing the holy walk would remove the curse and restore strength while walking. Dumbfounded, the protagonist repeated what he had just read. The boy looked delighted as he held the slipper in his hands. It was great news for him, because the restoration could help him in a difficult moment. He thought he could fill another slot. Ordo moved around the panel and saw that each row could hold only one attribute, so there was no choice. Smiling, the man looked at the screen and used the boost to complete the final action. A new emblem on the panel read foot massage. Wearing it now restored HP, so he found it more practical. He also noticed its efficiency had increased, but strength and magic remained unchanged. His little sister slept beside him. He laughed, looking at the other slipper in front of him. He remembered the effects would change depending on the attribute. Deciding to check, he picked up another slipper and opened the panel showing skills and effects. A system window explained what the death walk was. It warned that once someone put on the slippers, they could not be removed, and walking would cause damage. The man realized this was the curse's effect. Arito examined his possession with a quiet delight, as if the danger did not frighten him but drew him in, and imagined what would happen if he put on both slippers. Deciding it was too dangerous, the young man did not test his idea, got out of bed, put the slipper in the drawer, and felt glad he had the analysis. Blowing out the candle on the table, he got into bed, wrapped himself in a blanket, and felt lucky to have that skill. Ordo lay down beside his sister and drifted off, where he still needed to gain more knowledge and experience. 5 years ago, spring arrived, and in the meadow the wind swayed the flowers and sent leaves up against the cloudy sky. At 15, he was about to leave the village that day, a smile on his face as if he felt no fear. He had to leave the village where he grew up. The protagonist opened the door, and light streamed through the crack into the room as he prepared to go to the city for training. On the street, he had already said goodbye to his parents. They gave him parting words. His mother asked him to take care of himself, and his father told him not to mess things up. Smiling at his family, he promised to do his best. Among the father and mother, a student and an old man with a cane, the height differences among the people in the gnome were very noticeable. Uncle Tom called the boy and asked him to take something. He wanted to give a parting gift and told her to use it wisely. A small bag jingled in Arito's hands. He looked at it, guessing what was inside. The elder said there wasn't much money, but it would be enough to live on for about a week in the city. Like the boy's parents, he was rooting for him. Startled, the hero stared at the master, too surprised to speak. After thanking everyone, he vowed not only to succeed, but also to return. Arito raised his hand, waved goodbye to them, and walked off with a smile. Setting out on his first adventure, he left his parents, Uncle Tom, and the villagers behind, with a pine forest rising in the background. Counting all 4 lives, he's lived 135 years, and this is the first time anyone has been that kind to him. Clenching his fists, the hero was ready to do everything he could to pursue his dream and meet his loved one's expectations. The young man walked through the forest, feeling depressed because even though he had decided to leave, he would miss everyone. Regret filled him as he realized he would have to leave the village sooner or later. Ordo chuckled at the thought of Uncle Tom. He never expected the dwarf to be at such a low level because the dwarf had almost no experience enhancing items. Tom had only a few recipes for enhancing, all meant for household appliances, and his only opponent was a raccoon. Finally, the guy went to town. Inside his backpack were weapons, armor, and money. He had also put points into HP and MP. The panel showed this. The hero closed the screen and walked on. A downcast look settled on his face. His only regret was not being able to say goodbye to his sister. Rows of cypress trees grew on both sides as a flock of birds flew just above their tops. The boy paused. Before him stood a city of quaint wooden houses. Relieved, Arito wiped the sweat from his forehead and exhaled, glad he'd made it here before sunset. He weighed the bag in his hand, not wanting to spend the night in the field or to spend any money. Turning around, the protagonist saw a resident with a horse nearby and thought he could spend the night in the stable when someone called to the boy. Checking the collar, he saw a woman in heels standing in front of him and fell silent, waiting apprehensively to hear what she wanted. Fair-haired and elegantly dressed, a girl with a hairpin asked if anything was bothering the young man. The woman asked again to see if he had any concerns. She smiled, crossed her arms over her chest, and waited for his answer. Fear tightened her voice as she asked whether she was really talking to him, while the stranger's expression shifted. She looked at him closely, as if she saw something she had not expected. The girl became angry and said he had already been contacted. She tried to figure out how late she was. The young man winced. He had no idea what they were talking about. The woman's eyes clouded over as she wondered what to do next. Though he liked her, she seemed strange to him, and the stranger said she had only one thing left to give him, the only thing she could do that no one else would. Orito didn't understand, but the girl was determined. Taking the hero's hand, she told him to follow her because they couldn't do it here. He had no time to pull himself together and ask her to wait before she forcibly dragged him along. Frightened by the girl's behavior, he urged her to say where they were going, and Orito was surprised when the woman said they were heading to the hotel since he had no immediate plans to go there. The woman handed the clerk his money and wished them a good rest in the best room. The boy was horrified because he hadn't even noticed her taking it. The door creaked open to reveal a double bed in the middle of the room. The young man stared at his bag of money, tears in his eyes. He thought it would be better in the stable, since there was only one bed in the room. The girl, however, seemed quite happy with everything. The protagonist froze when the stranger was naked and told him to undress. The reason she did it was unclear to him. She would do what needed to be done. Ordo lay on the bed, hands over his eyes, too embarrassed to look at her. The woman said she had already brought chaos into his life and gripped his shoulder firmly. She bent over the young man. She needed a physical connection to break the rule. The girl said she wanted to teach him about the world, but only what their predecessors had discovered. She told him that with all 7 attributes, he could find every known improvement. She knew the best night of his life would vanish from his memory like smoke, and that would probably offend him. It was her first time, so she asked him to be gentle. Sunlight poured through the uncurtained windows while the main character slept. Then something woke him and he sneezed. Orito climbed out of bed, freezing and with no idea where his clothes had gone. Starting to dress, he found himself in a surprisingly large hotel room and discovered his money bag had very little left. He brought his hand to his face and lamented that he could do this after spending the money his loved ones had given him. Then a strange new feeling came over him. The guy should have earned many more points while he was sleeping than he did. Expecting the magical increase in points or skills to happen again, he opened the panel and searched, but his power layout remained unchanged. The boy noticed the status was unchanged. The stats were still low, and the points had not increased, but he did not lose hope and decided to test his skills in case a new one had appeared. He froze and stared at the panel, mouth open, as illustrations of improvements appeared. He could now use recipes to upgrade items at any time. The screen showed many recipes, and one was a skill the hero had never heard of, making Orito suspicious. He glanced back. The day before, the young man had decided to try improving his weapon. The boy left the sword propped against the bed's edge. It had been given to him by a wandering church traveler to protect him if monsters attacked, but the man had told him to run. The traveler still urged using the sword only when it was really needed. Remembering that Orito was older than his peers and would understand everything, he corrected himself. The word old man seemed to hit the boy in the chest. Grateful, the protagonist thought the remark unnecessary. Pushing his memories aside, the young man checked the panel indicators and saw the sword had 27 HP and was badly damaged. Orito knew HP equaled a person's status, so if it hit 0, the item would break. The boy examined the panel and noticed the item's efficiency indicator appear when used as intended. A strength or durability indicator appeared on the screen, and increasing strength raised HP accordingly. The only thing left was magical power, the indicators for magic strength and magic resistance. The sword had 2 slots, and the boy said it was the most basic setup and that adding a fire attribute would boost its performance. Orito raised a clenched fist above his head and let out a battle cry. Wanting to put the explanation aside, he tried to carry out his plan. The sword's status shifted, revealing a new effect. The boy could try the Fire Strike, a slashing sword move that adds fire, but he knew his low level would make it weak. Raising his hand over the plate on the panel, he confirmed the action and paused to think it over carefully. Even after adding 4 attributes, the sword would only be slightly stronger in 2 slots, and he wasn't sure there was room for romance. Opposing forces like fire and water or darkness and light lose their power when mixed. Only chaos remained, but the boy did not know because neither humans nor non-humans could control it. Confused, the young man decided to try a practical example because the required improvement points were quite high. For upgrades, he earns points like experience, so he swiped the panel and tapped the confirm bar, deciding to go ahead. The on-screen changes angered Arito because they lowered his status. A new effect has arrived. It is a sword that destroys itself. The hero realized the item's remaining HP had been spent to deal massive damage, and the sword shattered into pieces, so he could still use it as a normal weapon, but it handled like a wooden stick. Examining the sword, he judged chaos useless, but quickly set that aside and decided it should be paired with another attribute. Pressing a few more buttons on the panel, he took a chance, and the information on the screen changed. Arito was pleased to see that all the indicators had increased, which was even better than the two fires combined. The boy realized the chaos attribute only worked when fully charged and used with other attributes. Raising the sword into the air, he said combining it with fire was a good idea, but he wanted to make it even stronger. He had a new idea to strengthen it with light or darkness. The young man decided to remove the fire first, then add darkness. He pressed the required plates on the panel and confirmed his actions again by giving his consent. Light pulsed from the sword in Arito's hands, and he stood frozen, waiting for the transformation. The hissing weapon transformed. Its appearance was startling, with monograms on the handle and an unusually shaped tip. An ominous aura came from the sword, and when he used his appraisal skill, he realized it had become magical. And a rank was quite strong. Arito noticed the magic power had risen to C rank, and the poison strike would be effective. With his mana, the boy could use it only once. That was amazing for him. No longer afraid of the monsters he might encounter, he knew that with this sword, even with low stats, he could destroy them all, and a simple wound counted as a victory. The grass swayed in the wind as a young man stood in the forest holding a sword he was about to try for the first time. A huge boulder sat in the middle of the clearing. Arito adjusted his grip on the sword's hilt, aware the blade was at least a rank and could cut through rock easily. Thinking it would work, he quickened his pace, boots scraping the ground, lifted his sword off his shoulder and hurled it with all his strength, driving it into a boulder in the forest thicket. The boy ground his teeth and his hands trembled. Groaning in pain, he shook his hands in the air to speed it up. It seemed he had done almost no damage, and it did not look like a cut at all, but there was no crack in the boulder. Arito wondered why this happened and thought his status might be too low. Growing nervous, he turned to look for an exit. Spotting his armor, he decided to reinforce it. It wasn't armor at all, just a saucepan lid he'd been given as a gift. Uncle Tom forbade him from fighting and said the first thing to do when monsters attacked was to escape. He also advised throwing a lid at them if needed. Arito knew that reinforcing the lid with earth would make it stronger. It was just a pot lid with a small stat boost, and he couldn't fit chaos into the slot, so he used the wind and the lid lit up. The panel displayed the name Flying Stormcap, which seemed strange to him, and the Flight Plus effect appeared, allowing him to throw the object farther and hit the target accurately. The boy took a chance and tossed the lid. Her flight path cut the pair off the tree. Arito watched it with fascination and admiration. Crouching, he reached for the lid. It proved far more useful than the protagonist first expected. He judged the wind just right for the lid. Uncle Tom's motto about quitting and staying in control came true. Sheathing his sword, he realized the enhancement was complete and that weak monsters would start appearing, so he needed to be more careful. A flock of birds flew across the sky. In the forest, someone scolded a girl named Qualis, calling what she had done vile and saying she should be ashamed. Facing Sierra, she asked him not to yell at her, saying she had no choice, and he was horrified because the only way to reach the boy was through direct physical contact. The third girl wondered whether one of the three goddesses losing her virginity would cause many problems. Qualis didn't think it would affect her much, only that she might not be able to return to her original form. Two of the goddesses insisted it was too serious, while the third thought it would be a good idea to end life with the world left in this form. Sierra thought it was too much because the girl had created a new skill for the guy and given it to him, which she saw as cheating. The goddess said she had made it for a master who passed her tests 100 years ago, and when he died the skill returned, but she had no use for it. Her expression darkened at the answer, as she tried to understand why she had given up her analytical skills. The third goddess did not notice a difference, because Arito's happiness mattered more to her, and the skill would return after his death. She fished while the girls argued about the dark, talked about the guy as if he were her child, and she had a strong maternal instinct. It seemed to her that Sierra-chan thought she had given her nothing of value. The goddess was indignant, and Dark thought that even though they gave people no special advantages, it was worth asking what he wanted. Sierra cried, knowing glasses were always scarce, and the light attribute was the least valuable because it was the most common. She had no more advantages to give, but wanted to help the hero a little until he mastered item enhancement, so she was determined to do it, and Dark said goodbye. The goddess asked her what she would become. Taking the stick in her hands, she began to twirl it. Tossing her sword over her shoulder, she replied that she would be an adventurer. In this form she was weaker, but she enjoyed it more. Sarah understood her and felt happy, then asked what Qualis thought about it. She said she wanted to become an alchemist. Goddess Sarah was glad to hear that an alchemist makes items and potions, and that an adventurer using them can help enhance those items. They left before she finished her story, saying goodbye and leaving her alone with thoughts about Arito. Alone in the forest, she cried that it was unfair, and only the birds heard her. A girl turned around quickly. A huge snake crawled toward her, hissing, and she moved her leg aside, ready to jump. While flying, she kicked the snake and landed gently. Touching the ground, she felt something and looked into the forest thicket. Straightening to her full height, she became alert. A huge monster's foot landed right nearby. The monster knocked down trees and walked away roaring. He looked terrifying. A small fish splashed in the river as Arito walked through the forest and pushed a small branch aside with his hand. You left the city 3 days ago. With the sun sinking, the boy hoped he'd make it before nightfall. Then he heard a sound. He turned around in fear, unsure what kind of earthquake it was. These couldn't have been a person's footsteps because large monsters live here. If the monster is weak, the young man will handle it easily. A rabbit jumped out onto the road here. It wasn't just one. The boy was surprised to see a whole group of them, since that is rare. He realized they weren't even paying attention to the man and seemed to be running from someone. Birds burst from the treetops, a loud roar drew nearer, and someone huge was approaching fast. A girl appeared in front of Arito with a loud scream, crying. A few days later, he asked her how she was doing. The girl watched the traveler in silence. She jumped right on him and I knocked him down. Screaming with joy, she realized it was her brother. Throwing him to the ground, she broke down in tears while the young man tried to calm her. Leela carries the blood of the great blue wolf from one of the oldest werewolf tribes. When Arito was just 3 years old, he was playing at home. On the outskirts of the village, his mother found a werewolf and a child, but his wounds were too severe and he died 3 days later. They took in the child he entrusted to them and made him part of their family. This is the story of Leela. The protagonist wanted to know what Leela was doing there. Leela said her brother had left the village and she had decided to follow him. The girl felt despondent. Convinced Orito's brother would not have taken her, she left without telling anyone. The man understood why she had not seen him off then. A young man sighed in disbelief. Gently he stroked his sister's hair as she looked at him with tears in her eyes, and he said he was glad she was okay. The girl beamed and Arito thought she was angry that he had left, but he was glad to see her. Suddenly something appeared behind him. A huge monster appeared, and the group was terrified, unable to tell what it was. Huge teeth and jutting fangs filled the monster's mouth. A huge hand started cutting down trees. The boy's analysis revealed the monster's characteristics. He was stunned when a hunchbacked ogre, a B-rank monster, appeared before him. There was no time to figure out why a monster of that rank was here. His priority was protecting Leo, so he drew his sword and grinned menacingly. The system window announced an attribute bonus. Strength increased by 40%. Despite being B-rank, the monster carried a magic sword. Furious, the monster let out a wild roar and raised his hand above the boys to strike with all his strength. Rito realized with regret that he probably would not make it out alive. Across his 3 lives, he never gave up, so he grabbed his pot lid with a grin and it gained a 20% efficiency bonus. The ogre crashed to the ground and the brother and sister were thrown back. The boy braced his feet and pushed against the ground. A notification appeared saying he could use the shield 5 more times. Arito thought of another option, since even if they ran, at this distance the monster would catch them. The monster opened its mouth and roared, so the boy told his sister to stay put, and she asked him what he planned to do. Her brother charged the ogre, drawing his sword because he wanted to destroy it. Using the petrification effect, he froze the monster. Arito chose to trigger the self-destruct effect. Knowing he had only one chance, he believed he could do it and picked up his shield after grabbing his sword. He leaped and struck with each of his weapons in turn. At last, he activated the self-destruct effect and raised his unique sword. The strike produced a blinding flash. Leela turned away, unable to bear the intense light. A massive explosion followed, visible from a distance. The gods granted this world several blessings, including the HP life system. You will feel pain or numbness until your HP reaches 0, and you will not die before then. If your HP reaches 0, your life ends, and even a simple fall can kill you. In their world, HP appears in humans, demi-humans, monsters, demons, armor, and weapons, but the system does not apply to plants, animals, stones, or similar things. This is the life system in their world. Arito fell onto his back, exhaled, was covered in scratches, and knew he was in serious danger. His HP remained 7 out of 150. Alarmed, Leela hurried to her brother. Squinting in pain, he still asked first if she was okay. Lily said she wasn't hurt. He wanted to see how much damage he'd done to the ogre. The monster let out a soft roar, its HP at 0 and a huge hole gaping in its belly. The protagonist saw the monster had no HP left. It stared at him with empty eyes, but the boy himself had run out of mana. He sent his sister to finish off the ogre, and Leela obeyed at once. She executed her signature kick and landed. Turning around, she used freeze. Orito's little sister landed the decisive blow on the monster's jaw, and the boy cheered her success as he watched the battle in the light. The ogre crashed down, unconscious, before the girl even landed. Leela landed and took a battle stance. Using his skill, brother could see all her features clearly. She ran up to him and they high-fived, thrilled that they had succeeded. Suddenly the boys noticed a bright glare near the ogre. A glowing ball hovered in the air, shining. Realizing they had gotten the item for defeating the monster, the young man told Leela to take it, and she agreed, ran after it, and soon had the glare. A bottle of ogre water appeared in her hands instead. Arito saw it had a darkness attribute and a stomach curse effect. The girl, unaware of those details, offered it to her brother to try, which confused him. He told her right away that it was a liquid that gathered in the ogre's hump, and that drinking it would cause stomach pains and a curse, so Leo's desire to try it vanished. At the edge of the forest, the boys sat, while the girl used a weak healing skill to ease her brother's back pain. One of the boys had been sure she had not told their parents she was leaving, but she surprised him by having told them. Her parents supported her and told her they were very happy to hear it, since she had been very sad about her brother leaving. When Mom and Dad agreed, Arito saw there was nothing he could do, so he asked his sister to go with him, and she agreed happily. They walked arm in arm through the woods and thickets, and the girl sang with joy that she was finally with her brother. The goddess hid behind a tree and watched the boys. She was sure he would get what he wanted. The goddess had planned to help him even before she gave him the skill. The young man was stronger than she expected, and when she saw he had a girlfriend, everything felt fine. Sad that she couldn't follow him in secret, she held back because Sierra would scold her for being mean. She would kill only the monsters that stood in her way. It did not seem like favoritism to her. Tonight the sunset faded. The moon and stars appeared in the sky. Arito and Leela reached the city without meeting a single monster. The boy felt very lucky. His sister was hungry. Her brother opened the door of some place and said they had been on a long journey and could use something to eat. The tavern was crowded. Some people were drinking while others ordered food. A waitress brought dishes to the tables, and another worker stood behind the counter. A short-haired woman greeted them. Not recognizing the boys, she assumed they were not from around here and asked what they would like to order. The boy placed some coins on the table and asked them to bring something for both of them, along with milk and water. Twirling another coin in his hands, he suggested they talk later because he really wanted to hear stories. The waitress grinned at the young man's resourcefulness. They reached an agreement. The woman promised to tell him everything he wanted and meanwhile bring them food, but she warned their place was a little noisy. In the distance, a group of people sat, tipsy and behaving rudely, but Arito had nothing to fear because they would soon pass out and fall silent from so much alcohol. The old man at the next table laughed and decided to leave them alone. They were in high spirits, maybe they had just made a lot of money. The old man said they were adventurers from Zexheim who had recently been selling recovery potions at very high prices, and the boy asked whether they had been attacked by demons or struck by a plague. The mayor's daughter has fallen under a strange spell. 3 days ago the mayor sent his man to Zexheim to find a cure, but he still hasn't returned, and her HP is dropping fast. The boy thought it would take him 2 days on horseback to get there, take care of his business, and come back. A waitress brought the order and apologized for the long wait, interrupting his thoughts. The young man was ready to eat everything on the table. The old man beside him was getting ready to leave. Arito knew the dishes would be more expensive and feared he did not have enough money. The waitress wanted to apologize for the noise and the place and asked what he wanted to know. Sitting in the old man's seat at the next table, she hoped the conversation wouldn't be about loud drunks. The protagonist said they were heading to Zexheim to become a master of item enhancement. She replied it was a city of adventurers with many forges and shops selling weapons, armor, and more, and mentioned hearing about workshops that enhance items. After thanking her, he asked about rumors in the city, and the woman paused before saying she had heard a new dungeon, or something like that, had recently been discovered. Orito brightened at the news. The waitress said they were in the mountains not far from the city, that the brave souls who went in never came back, and that the Seekers Guild was recruiting a team. She didn't know how big the dungeon was because the mayor's daughter's curse meant they couldn't afford to worry, and her story was cut short by rowdy guests who had run out of drinks and were shouting for more. As she rose from the table, the boy handed her the coins and thanked her for the conversation, though she considered it unimportant. It mattered to the man that the girl's screams wouldn't stop, so he volunteered to help the waitress to repay her for treating them. After thanking the group for waiting, drinks were served and everyone clinked glasses and continued the meeting in the same spirit. With the first sip, they agreed the drink was much better than the last. The adventurer told them not to rush and said they would be silent now for sure. Lily looked surprised and asked him to explain his certainty. They began to feel sleepy, and one man was pleased, saying he had told his sister about it. He said the group would get drunk and fall asleep, and they did. The young man thought the fire attribute had boosted the alcohol's taste and strength, but he knew the next morning would bring a severe hangover as their punishment for the noise. The young man admitted it might have been a waste of points, but now they could eat in peace. After finishing the dishes, the boys thanked the workers. The door opened. Someone wished them a good journey. The food had been delicious. They now had to take a bath. Arito still had one more thing to do. Night had fallen, but he still needed time to meet the mayor. A candle burned outside the window. A very fat man lay in bed sobbing. An overcast sky hung above, and near the partly ruined fortress, the sounds of a pursuit could be heard. A girl in heels looks like she's running from someone chasing her. Black dust closed in around her, and she didn't know where to go to escape it. Ornate metal gates swung open. Arito and Leela stood before a luxurious house. The mayor's mansion was enormous, and the boys were amazed at its size. The younger sister admitted she was a little scared, and the brother reassured her everything was fine, saying he only needed to ask a few questions. A young man knocked on the door, said he was a traveler, and apologized for disturbing us. He carried a bottle of Ogre water to treat a stomach curse and hoped it would help. Using the illustration skill, the protagonist learns that Ogre water can remove curses when enhanced with the light attribute. It won't stop every curse, but it will stop some. The curse's nature was never revealed, and no matter how many people the brother and sister asked, nobody knew. The butler led them into the mansion. To see if the ogre's water could help, they first had to learn what kind of curse it was. They sat on the couch waiting, and Orito couldn't believe the mayor had brought in the first teenager he met who said he might help with the curse. He wondered whether they were really that desperate. The doors swung open, and a man stood before them. Mayor Thomas wanted to know which boy could lift the curse on his daughter, and he immediately burst into tears, embarrassing the newly arrived guests. The boy repeated his words, making the old man cry and grab his hand. The mayor realized it might be a vain hope because the boy was very young, but he chose to believe him and ordered him to break the curse. The old man led the guest into his daughter's room, and although the young man resisted, the old man ignored him completely. The mayor offered a generous reward if Hereto helped, but he also wanted to ask something else. The man grew serious and warned his daughter's spell had to be kept secret, or he would spend a fortune hiring S-rank hunters to eliminate anyone he told. The boy did not argue and said he understood. He realized he shouldn't have come and meddled in something that wasn't his business. The old man remained adamant and kept saying they didn't have much time. All three stopped in the corridor or across from the girl's room. The mayor opened the door and the travelers looked inside. Only a single candle burned in the room, and nothing else could be seen. It was too dark to use the analysis, but the boy could still make out the outline of a silhouette on the bed. Noises came from the back of the room, and he felt confused. The young man assumed it was his breath, and the mayor said she was getting worse every day and reminded him not to talk about the curse or about what his daughter looked like. Arito swallowed hard and stepped into the room. Leela clutched the hem of his robe. The adventurer reached up to lower the canopy over the bed. Before them lay a woman so enormous she occupied the entire bed. He watched her snore and noticed her swollen hands and face. He discovered she had an expansion curse that made a person gain weight even without eating, and while it did not cause pain, it left them unable to move and their HP fell every day, so death became slow and painful. The mayor pressed the protagonist to remove the curse, and 1,000 thoughts swarmed his mind since it was impossible without an A-rank mage. Even if he strengthened the ogre's water, it remained beyond his control. The old man started to doubt the young man could do it, and he frantically worked out his moves while thinking how to answer him. A sudden cry came as the girl sobbed and stuttered, calling for help, and he froze. Ordo asked Mr. Thomas and Leela to leave so he could focus. The mayor trusted him, told him to save Molina, then left the room and closed the door behind him. Unsure of himself, the protagonist had a premonition that he could turn an ordinary copper sword into a magical one, so he risked pressing the necessary plates on the panel. Bracing himself, he focused all his strength on the glowing flask of ogre water floating between his hands. Against all odds, the ogre's water turned into holy water with the attributes of light and chaos and a greatly enhanced purification effect. Arito felt stunned by his success. He had truly done it and could now lift Lady Melna's curse. Only one thing remained. She had to drink it. He opened the bottle and poured it into her mouth. A bright glow from her body forced the boy to shield his eyes with his hand. Mayor Thomas and Leela stood just outside the door, clearly worried. The door eased open and Arito's head peered through the crack. He told the mayor he was finished, and the mayor looked very worried. Mr. Thomas learned from the young man that the curse had been lifted. Bursting into the room, he called his daughter's name as he moved through. Crying, she could already speak. Melna's father watched her with tears in his eyes and could not believe it was really over. Filled with happiness, the man kept hugging his daughter. Leela and Arito watched the happy family in silence. Praising her brother, the girl called him great, but did not understand how he managed to lift the curse. He replied that he was mostly just lucky. They walked past a room with empty beds. Unable to resist, she climbed into bed and propped her feet up. As the mayor came up, she kept saying how soft it felt there. Her brother was about to scold her, but the gentleman was not angry and just laughed, saying everything was fine. The butler entered carrying a bag. Mr. Thomas told them to rest and enjoy themselves today because they had saved his daughter's life, then called to Arito, who turned around. The mayor was about to give the boy a well-deserved reward, and the bag contained 5 million gillies. Not wanting the boys to have trouble sleeping because of the weight, he decided to reward them right away, and when someone tried to interrupt, he went on, saying this was all he could give right now, and asking them not to argue and to accept it. Grateful, the young man accepted the old man's reward and took the bag. Mr. Thomas said he should be the one to say thank you, apologized for taking so long, and said good night. An open bag of coins lay on the floor. Astonished by the wealth they'd just gotten, the boys could hardly believe it. Arito warned his sister they needed to think about how they'd live in Zech's home before spending money. Leela wondered if he would upgrade the items. Arito said he would, but planned to get a job first to gain experience. Remembering the waitress, the young man knew the city had many forges that upgraded items and were hiring, and he found several interesting ones but faced one obstacle. Showing his appraisal skill and other abilities in his status would get him into serious trouble, so he wanted to hide it somehow. Growing concerned, the girl thought her brother might be unwell or tired, so she suggested he take a bath. Arito agreed that a lot had happened today and said she needed to learn to wash herself, and because she was upset, her brother made concessions. A barrel sat in a small bench beside the bathtub. He was lathering the girl's hair around her ears. When they went to Zexheim, he suggested his sister enroll in the school there that trained adventurers and asked if she was interested. She thought about it while the young man explained that her strong physical attributes set her apart, and with proper training, she could become an S-rank adventurer, a dream for many. He assured her she could go to school and didn't have to force herself to be an adventurer. School wasn't only about that. Leela didn't understand what he meant. The brothers said they taught not only how to become adventurers, but also what you need to know before going out into the world. Drawing on his experience, he said it was fine for her to choose her own path. The girl struggled for a moment. Soap bubbles drift through the bathroom. She had come up with something. Standing up, she announced that Leela would become an adventurer. Rita said the girl would wash herself. Water leaked through the drain. A flock of birds crossed the sky as the sun's rays pierced the coniferous forest. The boy thanked Mr. Thomas for everything and said goodbye. They were sorry he missed breakfast, but the mayor assured them everything was fine and looked forward to the next meeting with them. The children waved as the master, and the butler stood at the gate and watched them go. Leela asked how far it was from here to the next town. The trip took 2 days. The boys received talismans to protect them from monsters, which the main character found very generous. The talismans scared off monsters at or below the owner's level, but did nothing against monsters of danger level or higher. Ordo said it had 2 weak stats and would be useless, so he planned to give it to his sister, but he thought he could strengthen the talisman with the darkness attribute and turn it into a stat-hiding talisman. He felt it would be too unnatural. White squares will look too odd and will only draw more attention. Only one attribute remained that he could rely on, so he filled a slot with chaos. Leela watched her brother with interest. He tried to understand how darkness and chaos would strengthen the talisman. The concealment effect suddenly switched to disguise, and now he could change the status at will. The status was changed to prevent noise during evaluation. While he thought a B skill rank would really help him get a job, Leela suddenly grabbed his hand. She asked permission to look ahead. They enjoyed views of the mountains, and something far off caught their eye. This was Zexheim, the city of adventurers. Their path led here. The goddess with a scepter stood at Zexheim's western gate, wearing delicate sandals. At last she reached the city, and was relieved that Arito had not arrived here yet. She felt uneasy about where she and Leela were. Arriving in the city of adventurers, the boys were greeted by an exciting atmosphere from the first moments. The city was truly beautiful. The streets were crowded. People hurried about their business. Busy with many tasks, the brother and sister went to Montenio Bank to resolve important matters. As soon as they entered, a consultant greeted them and offered to help. Arito decided to deposit money into his account, and the bank consultant called it a deposit. When asked if he had a credit card, he said he had just arrived in the city and did not understand banking well. The bank employee said the men were probably not yet familiar with the city's unique system, so the consultant called Samantha, one of his colleagues who understood it best. With a friendly smile, the girl approached the group, introduced herself, created a warm, trusting connection, and promised to explain how the city's unique system works. Arito was happy to meet Samantha and surprised by how short she was. She explained she is a dwarf and 24, then invited the guys to come along. Samantha began explaining to Arito and Leela how to open a bank account. First, the girl asked how much they had to deposit and noted that small amounts were accepted. Arito said the bag held 5 million GI, a large sum of local currency. Samantha smiled and said it was not money a child would carry. The girl offered to deposit the amount into the account and give the guys 1 year of silver concierge service, 3 free financial consultations a year, and help finding housing and signing a lease. At Reno Bay, Samantha examined the coins to see if they were real. Arito offered to put up all his money and asked the gnome to help send San Leela's little sister to school. Samantha agreed to help. Thanking him for his trust, she said that before he deposited the money she would explain the unique system. It turned out coins were hardly used because of a card called Gilly or Gillica. Money is sent to a card linked to a verified identity that only the owner can access, and with your permission loved ones can use the card or receive extra cards on a joint account. Samantha read the card and asked him to touch it with his fingers. The registration was complete and the money had already been processed and loaded onto the card. The boy asked Samantha if the Gillica could be improved. Samantha said all the slots were blocked and that when closing the account the cart had to be returned as it was. The girl wanted to know whether anyone had improved the Gillica. Arito found no useful upgrades. The map gets lighter with wind, heavier with earth, tracks health with water, and the light changes color. Check the illustrations. Samantha promised to arrange housing for her brother and sister. They will go see the options tomorrow morning. The meeting is at 9 a.m. After the girl thanked Arito and Leila for their time, the boys went to lunch because the money was safe, and then Leila noticed someone. Strangers are arguing, and it's interesting to learn exactly what happened. Though the team looks balanced, it's clear they're having problems. Curious, the stranger asked why the boys had decided to leave. Arito said he didn't want to block the bank entrance and asked how he could help. The stranger introduced herself as Sierra, apologized for the abruptness, and asked him to pretend they knew each other. A stranger said she had registered as an adventurer yesterday, and a B-rank team now wanted her to join, so the boy listened carefully and understood what Sierra meant. Arito questioned her background, since a B-rank team could find someone more experienced, and her attributes are medium healing, paralysis defense, detoxification, holy arrow, and purification. Studying Sierra, the boy noticed her status was off, cloudy and unusual, and it grabbed his attention and raised questions. Arito noticed he and his sister hadn't eaten yet, and it was time for a lunch break. He apologized to Sierra. The boys began getting ready to leave. A stranger offered to join them because she was going to lunch nearby. Sarah offered to be Orito's first client if he wanted to become an item enhancement master. Orito thanked her for trusting him. The boy refused to let his guard down, even though Sierra was beautiful, and despite her seeming harmless, he stayed careful. Arito spotted the holy dragon staff with healing, blessing, curse protection, and a powerful breath and was surprised by its uniqueness, so he thought about the mysterious Sierra. Ordo called the staff incredible and grew curious about it. Sierra explained it was a family heirloom, but did not know the details of its history. The boy admitted he hadn't realized how important the staff was to her, and suspected the stranger was hiding her true origins while studying society as an adventurer. Arito wondered whether Sarah had bad intentions and might have stolen the staff. Doubts about the stranger grew. At that moment, Leo said something to her brother. The younger sister said her brother had accepted the proposal. Lilo was happy for Sierra. The stranger thanked Arito for being understanding, but Arito had no idea what they were talking about. Sierra said that then they needed a bigger room. Leela said a small room would be enough for her and everyone could live together. Sierra argued it would be inconvenient at her age. Arito asked the girls what they were talking about. Because Sierra had already agreed, the stranger was happy to be part of their life together. At that moment, Arito remembered Sierra's story and thought about what he had heard. Leela enjoyed the food. Arito apologized to the stranger for asking her to look after his sister. Arito knew it might be inconvenient. The stranger said she did not mind and was willing to help. The younger sister wished her brother good luck. Sarah promised the boy she would take care of his sister. The adventurer thanked his new acquaintance. Then he went about his business. Arito remembered Sierra. Using the rare black card, Sierra paid for the boys and her staff was exceptional. The boy could not figure out who this mysterious girl was. Shy Leela liked Sierra and thought Sierra might be a good person. Arito set it aside and focused on his own affairs. The adventurer began looking for a job. The employer noted the boy's enthusiasm, but said it was not enough and suggested Arito learn to create objects, explaining he would always have time later to strengthen things, but needed to expand his knowledge in other areas now. The man advised dropping the enhancement, because if it didn't reach S rank, each enhancement attempt would cost skill points, and the boy would be unable to do anything. The worker said they appreciated the enhancement, but found it less effective than other skills, and preferred to create items from scratch as a blacksmith. Silence, Arito was not accepted anywhere, and he felt upset. With a B rank, the adventurer felt everything was under control despite only specializing in improving items. But once the boy began getting refused at the threshold, there was nothing more to do. The whole disguise would fall apart because Arito would be hired with clearly different blacksmith skills. Leela called her brother. When he answered, he immediately asked what had happened. Worried by her voice, he wanted to know what was going on. The little sister answered in surprise when she heard her brother's voice on the phone, and Arito, noticing her excitement, told Leela to calm down and then gently asked if anyone was near her. The sister told her brother he had asked her to act secretly. At the same time, Sierra, worried, asked what exactly had happened to Leela because the girl's behavior now seemed strange to her. The little sister called her brother to check on him. Arito said there were no significant results yet and apologized for worrying her. Leela supported him. The sister said he could create something incredible. He replied that he didn't actually create it, but only improved it. It was still impressive, and Leo added that only her brother could do something like that. At lunch, Arito started playing with the Jilica, studied its structure closely, and learned a new skill called Bell that greatly expanded the card's capabilities. The boy didn't fully understand how the system worked. Synchronization with the database, cashless payments, and setting up communication. Now he can talk to Leo from a distance, making communication easier. The employer said we must know the number of slots and what tribute the item has, what you get when attributes are combined, and that data analysis is essential. Arito said blacksmiths lack analytical skill unless they are born with it. The employer replied he had never heard of a blacksmith who only made improvements in their city. The worker said she hadn't seen any improvement in her S rank, and the adventurer added he only spent points on key skills and that there were at least 5 A-rank blacksmiths in the city. Arito was turned down because he wasn't right for the job, but the fact that no one is being considered for reinforcement is a good sign and means the boy has almost no competition. An adventurer has turned an ordinary sword into a magical blade, hidden his status, and brewed a powerful potion to counter strong curses, and he has all the necessary skills and attributes. Arito turned down the job, thanked Leela for her support and help, and after careful thought realized only he could make such an important choice. Instead of seeking work as an employee, he opened his own business. The boys invited Sierra to the dungeon, hoping she would come, but she tried to refuse. At Montanabank, Samantha welcomed customers warmly and cheerfully. Leela, Arito, and Sierra greeted Samantha warmly and respectfully. The boy told her eagerly that he wanted to start his own business as soon as possible. The bank's motto is to meet its clients' needs as fully as possible by providing quality service and support, so the employee agreed to help the guys. They showed Burrito an expensive property in the north by the gate with shops for adventurers, a cheaper one in the south where the newcomers live, and a third in the center with easy access but less popular. Sierra is willing to pay the rent. Arito wanted the rent as low as possible when split 3 ways. Samantha said the eastern part of the city was cheaper, but it had fewer adventurers. Samantha leaned close and whispered to Orito to ask whether he knew who Syrah was and where she was from, since he and his sister were going to live with her. Orito said he did not know, but he had seen her black card and assumed she was very important. Samantha warned Orito that it was naive to live with a stranger. The boy asked her to talk about Sarah, but Samantha knew little about her. Registration and card issuance went smoothly despite some oddities. A few days ago, Sierra made a large deposit. The bank searched for a nobleman matching her appearance but found none. Her kingdom of origin is still unknown. Recently, she registered as an adventurer, and although still a rookie, she has been seen with an experienced, respected adventurer known as Lone Wolf. Arito said Sierra was harassed when they first met. Samantha said the girl was scared in an unfamiliar city. Still, Lily is friendly with her, so things are okay, and Lily and Sierra found a good place. Split into 2 parts, the first floor has the owner's shop and an empty space. The second floor has the living room and dining room. The third has 3 empty rooms for living, and Arito liked the price and location. Some noted that there are slightly odd requirements in this area that could raise questions, but she did not explain what those peculiarities were, leaving the details unsaid. They said the owner should be in the store, so Arito apologized for the disturbance and asked the girl at the shop if she was the owner, and she said she had an unusual guest. The boy arrived earlier than the shop owner expected. Arito said he wanted to rent the shop and move in with the girls in the 3 rooms above. The owner agreed and asked them to be good neighbors. The adventurer thanked the girl in the shop. The owner asked if Arito was going to check anything, since the adventurer's eyes showed he deserved her trust. The boy did not understand the girl. Noting Sierra standing beside Arito, the shop owner said he clearly deserved her trust. The adventurer then asked if Sierra and the shop owner were friends. Sierra replied they were only acquaintances. The owner offered to buy the boys everything they'd need in life. Sierra wanted to speak to Arito alone and asked the owner not to do anything strange, but she said she was too worried. Qualis, the girl in the shop, said she was an alchemist and the owner of a potion shop, which immediately caught Orito's attention, and he wondered if she had actually opened it herself. Qualis is a beginner who can only make cheap potions, so she has to work hard to earn money, and Arito noticed her alchemy, fire magic, synthesis, wind magic, and appraisal skills are very low. Seeing Quala's odd mix of traits, the boy assumed it came from her magical specialization, though her status remained unclear. Quala noticed his stare and asked what the adventurer was looking at. Arito apologized for being absent-minded and quickly realized that Qualis needed a nearby item enhancement shop, so she could improve her potions' quality and effectiveness and sell them at a higher price. Qualis asked Arito to prove his skill by turning a common potion into an expensive, valuable one, and Arito was ready to take on a single bottle, but Qualis unexpectedly placed a whole batch of potions in front of him. A large bag with many pockets held the potions she took out, and Arito was surprised it held 10 times more than it looked. Although Qualis doubted Arito could improve the potions, he assured her and began with a recovery potion that restored 50 HP and cost about 2,000 gilli. The fire attribute was added to improve efficiency, but the recovery items are water-based, so the 2 attributes conflict, and the best solution is to add more water. The owner liked the improved recovery potion, so it now costs 5 times as much. Qual appreciated Arito's high level of skill, and now the boy must demonstrate that skill to customers. The next upgrade is a potion sought by adventurers, highly effective against a wide range of monsters because it contains a powerful poison. Magic power fuels adventures. Arito noted these potions will sell for more. Quality work in the Qualis style. The bag's owner faced an important mystery. She believed improving items required hard focus and a frown. She also thought you'd have to wait longer. The boy suggested leaving it a mystery and asked to take the remaining potions home to finish them where he could concentrate. Qualis agreed and asked for the rest to be upgraded into antidotes. The owner offered the adventurer 80% of the proceeds from potion sales and let him choose one of her roomy bags, leaving Arito surprised at how much he would receive. Qualis thinks this is not much to start with, and she asks the boy if he can upgrade his bag and make it larger so he can give her the same, and Arito thanks Qualis. Rushing home with memories of his first unforgettable job, the adventurer decided to finish the work he had started as soon as possible, but sudden strange sounds rose around him and caught his attention. Someone is asking for help. The stranger asked if he'd seen the task. He asked if he meant the old fort. The first A-rank adventurers who went in still haven't been found. It's been over 2 weeks, and most adventurers are busy with the new dungeons. This is something only an S-rank team can handle. Within a week of opening, the store had sold an impressive 1 million gillies, an excellent result for such a new establishment. Ordo has no clients, and his services go unnoticed because he is little known. Upgrading items is unpopular in his society. He does not know how to change the situation. Wallace joked as she stopped by her neighbor to offer advice, noting that people rarely come without a reason, especially to strangers, and that no one would suddenly ask a stranger for equipment upgrades. The shop owner told Arito to change his approach, saying that instead of waiting for customers to bring items, he should buy goods, improve them, and sell them, and Arito asked Qualis how to do it correctly. Qualis said it's better to sell goods directly to customers or to large stores. Arito said the store's location isn't bad. A new idea will improve the store's reputation. Customers will start coming. The owner said it would provide a steady income. The boy pointed out that Qualis only makes potions when she's in the mood. The girl said running the shop is her hobby. Arito decided to buy the items. Qualis said you must first choose one of 3 ways to obtain items: buy from shops or people, kill monsters, or order them from adventurers. She pointed out they needed to consider profit, efficiency, and retail quality, and that he was too weak, so it was better to order or buy products. His main goal was to become a successful adventurer. Arito had killed a B-rank monster with a magic sword, so if he stocked up and upgraded his items, weak monsters would not be a problem, and he decided to hunt monsters to get items. The adventurer thanked the owner and headed to the store. Qualis went home, and things grew quiet. Leela's now at preparatory school until the evening, and Sierra went on a trip with an old friend. They will be gone for several days. Sierra had many acquaintances, and the girl in the store hoped the boy would get there safely. The adventurer arrived at the Drawout Trading Company branch in the southern part of the city. It's a general store where newcomers gather because it has many inexpensive goods. The boy decided to buy a weapon to be ready for trouble. Arito, accustomed to sword fighting, inspected the selection carefully. A bronze sword caught his eye. This sword has been slightly improved. Under the illustration skill, when an item slot is given an attribute, you can no longer add attributes to that slot, even the same one. S-rank enhancement lets you unlock item slots. The enhancement level and rating show the total slots, but understanding the details takes experience and intuition, otherwise you can accidentally enhance the wrong slot. Arito looked for unfinished items that could be bought cheaply, improved, and sold for a higher price. Check the northern shops for more slots and better weapons. The boy saw armor priced at 600,000 gil, probably missing the upgrades, so it's being sold cheap. Even if a retailer buys and upgrades the armor, no one will buy it because you have to be very strong to wear it. It won't suit him. Then a girl peeked out and asked the adventurer what he thought. The man said it fit him perfectly, but it was too heavy. The saleswoman said the armor did not suit every customer, and Arito said he was buying it. The girl understood him. The boy thanked the saleswoman for her purchase. Arito bought a steel sword and armor that proved very heavy. The strain made his arms ache, but he was pleased. Now he had the finest equipment in the world. The boy upgraded the bag from Qualis, increasing its capacity 300-fold, and it became interdimensional so it could hold a huge number of items. After 3 days of trial and error, the adventurer lightened his armor and sword to make them more comfortable, and those changes left him ready for the test, so he went home confident in his abilities. Arito noticed someone standing in front of his shop. Curious about the stranger, the boy approached the cloaked girl who looked like a true adventurer and asked if she had come to see him and if she wanted to buy something. Throwing herself into his arms, the girl said happily that she had finally found an adventurer. The stranger apologized for holding Arito too tightly. The boy didn't recognize the girl. They had only recently met, but she was a little different. The adventurer realized Mrs. Molina was standing in front of him. The girl told him Arito had lifted the curse and saved her life. The boy noticed Molina had changed. The girl said she could never thank Arito enough, and Molina was ready to help the adventurer with any problem. The boy thanked the woman. Arito might be interested in an older woman like Molina. The girl was ready to teach the adventurer. Surprised, the boy asked Molina to tell him how she got the curse. The girl agreed to speak, unsure where to begin. She is an adventurer. Recently, her team was sent to investigate a small, old fort in the northern forest. It seems a high-ranking demon has settled there. An A-rank team went to the nearby old fort to investigate a possible link to the recent Gilram dungeon, but a black fog soon appeared. Molina had heard about an incredibly dangerous monster there, but she never saw it herself. A black fog then enveloped her, and she doesn't remember anything else. Fortunately, a different squad rescued the girl and she returned home, but Molina's companions disappeared. Last week, they were assigned to investigate the fort again, and adventurers are already lined up. A talented newcomer appears, the swordswoman, said to be a lone wolf who completes missions alone, possibly because of curses, and she decided to join the priestess, a fellow adventurer. The priestess seems odd too. Registered only 10 days ago with no completed quests, she carries an expensive staff, and people say she's a nobleman's daughter, so it's strange the swordswoman brought her along. Orito remembered Samantha's words that Sierra was a newly registered adventurer, but had been seen with an experienced adventurer nicknamed Lone Wolf, so the boy then asked Molina for the name of the priestess. Dark took the quest. Melna remembered a young girl with dark skin. The priestess was Kina. Orito thanked the missus for the answers, but was sure Melna meant Sarah. Mrs. stood up to leave, apologizing for distracting the boy from his work, and Melna said she needed help strengthening something and would come again. Orito closed his shop. Believing he would only be a hindrance and drag them down, he chose not to go with the priestess and the swordswoman. All the adventurer could do was believe and wait, but he had a favor to ask of Mrs. Qualley's. The shopkeeper figured the boy needed a large dose of mana restoration potion. Qualla found out about this when the guys moved into the 3 rooms above because the building's walls are thin, so the shop owner asked them to respect the neighbors and keep the noise down. If Wallace's strongest rivals ever found themselves in trouble, she wouldn't hesitate to help. Without explaining why, she led Orito behind the counter and asked if he was in a hurry. Dark was tired. Sierra asked her to be patient and explained it was hard to concentrate while also maintaining the sanctuary. Dark apologized because she did not want to complain. Dark admitted she was more to blame than anyone for being so relaxed and unprepared, and still had no idea where the demonic god had come from. The armored man asked Qualla's son whether they were headed the right way, since they hadn't seen any monsters or demons on the road. The girl said everything was fine and they'd be there soon. Orito understood Wallace's meaning. The boys reached the place where Sierra is. The girl warned the adventurer that the black fog itself is not dangerous. It is a distortion of the magical essence and contains curses that, when inhaled, greatly reduce health. Orito's armor showed no quality problems. The boy agreed with the girl. Oddly, she noticed improvements to the armor even though it looked the same on the outside. The armor was now steel and sacred, with an evil field of destruction and a light weight. Qualys pointed out that Orito's armor had a sanctuary skill like Sierra's staff. The adventurer said the fog wouldn't be much of a problem, but the owner didn't need to enter such a dangerous place. Qualis said there was no need to worry because she could use her magic, but since the protection was on Orito, she asked him to keep her safe and he agreed. Thick, dark fog hangs heavy and makes everything gloomy. You cannot see anything. Qualis warned you to be careful. The man suddenly saw a large number of monsters. The girl said the greeting had been unexpectedly lively. Orito said they had to run. There was no time to talk. Dark realized a demonic god would be far more dangerous. The girl is frustrated because destroying the monster is pointless, as it always comes back to life. Unaware, Sierra is nearly healed and asks Stark to hold on a little longer, because defeating the monster requires the light attribute, which Dark lacks. Meanwhile, Orito runs with Qualis, cradling the girl in his arms. The shop owner is pleased because it looks like a princess hug, but the adventurer needs to run faster. The monsters are very slow. Orito is sure that even if Wallace goes down, they will not catch up with her. The girl notes that she runs slowly, so they will catch up with her. The fog thickens and monsters press in. The shopkeeper is willing to go back to save Rito, but the adventurer refuses to give up. The boys broke away from the monsters, but the fog was thicker, and this place proved dangerous too. The adventurer was trapped. Qualis realized this was probably the fort's owner because no one dared to enter. The owner of the fort wears a wandering suit of magical armor and has the attributes darkness, strength, and agility. Orito realized the owner is very powerful and has energy absorption, a curse, dissolution, the ability to build temples, resistance to light, and self-healing. The fort's owner has many rare skills, but most importantly, he is the source of this black fog. Surprised, Sarah saw Orito and asked how he had gotten there. Orito, the adventurer, was relieved he had arrived in time. He noticed how exhausted the people were. Dark replied that these people were cursed by expansion. Orito said they were most likely members of Melna's crew. She then introduced herself as a simple adventurer. The adventurer saw Dark as too frivolous to be on Sierra's team. Now isn't the right time to date, but Qualis has shown interest in Dark. The owner realized the demon god's armor had become a demon, which was why Dark had problems. Over time, under the owner's influence, and after a long buildup of magical elements, it became an independent entity. These are, so to speak, the demon god's remains, but the demon is still an S-rank threat. Since Sierra is busy healing, Qualis sees Orito as the best option. The boy swallowed hard. Arito the adventurer was frightened, and the shop owner told him not to be so afraid. Facing a real demon, the boy would be helpless, but now is not the time to chat. Qualis realized the main threat to the demon god's remains was Arito, and the adventurer grew afraid as the demon approached him. Arito will have to act if the demon attacks, but the sword is still unimproved, and he cannot hold it with one hand, so he must move quickly. The demon pounced on the adventurer, knocked him down, and now his armor value is steadily decreasing. When the demon uses disillusion, the armor drops to 0 and melts, causing Arito to die. The adventurer must act fast. The armor can't be strengthened, the sword has gone missing, and he must use the demon's skill. This armor once belonged to the demon Belial. Legend says anyone who wears it will be cursed. It bears a deformation curse, grants dark defense, increases physical strength, and can adjust the wearer's size. If Arito switched all the slots to holy skills, the curse would disappear. The adventurer nearly died. He considered the fortification slot. Qualis believes in Arito. The adventurer seemed to understand what the girl had meant earlier. The boy reassured himself that he still had time, because the mechanism was the same as when strengthening the sword. Able to do this, the adventurer tries to concentrate to open an upgrade slot, choose an attribute, and set the fee, and now he must make the right choice. Arito risked everything he had. The monster then began to make terrible noises. It looked like the boy had won, and Qualis confirmed it. Arito is in shock. The boy prays in the dark, noting he must be tired. Sarah is glad about the adventurer's victory. Quala praises Dorito. The boy is grateful to the girls, especially Quala, for the useful advice. Arito sneezed. The girls grew worried because it was cold and they had no spare clothes. The shop owner said they could not go out like that. Veliel's cursed armor is worn out. It should automatically adjust to the body. First, Arito frees up upgrade slots and boosts the wind attribute to make it lighter. The boy may accept his poor stats now that the cursed armor grants greater physical strength, protection from dark and lightness. Putting on the armor, Arito feels disgust. Apparently the armor adjusts the body to itself, though usually the body is adjusted to the armor. Eventually, the boy gets used to the discomfort and completely forgets about the group of monsters. Qualis wondered when things would finally calm down. Arito said there was apparently no peace in sight as Dark rushed into battle. That's impressive, there are many monsters. Dark asks the boys to help. The shop owner believes an adventurer can now use the magical curse wisely to give solid support. Arito finds the request difficult, but he has no choice and rushes into battle to help Dark. Exhausted until then, the girl suddenly woke up on the floor. She called out to see if anyone was there. Sierra told the awakened girl she had nothing to fear, because the one in the armor was not a monster but its conqueror, yet the girl did not believe her since even the 3 A-rank adventurers were powerless. Hard to believe, the dark fog had already cleared by the time the girl woke and realized it. By the time she woke up and rested, word was already spreading through the city that a group had captured the monster's lair and rescued the missing adventurers. They say the team included Dark, the great swordswoman, Sarah, the priestess, and an unknown black knight. Leela cooked a tasty meal for the boys. Arito likes how it looks and expects Sierra will be pleased too. The sister finds exploring the dungeons amazing. The brother said he would tell her everything later. The siblings welcomed the guests. Dark greeted them and apologized for the interruption. Sierra apologized too, and Qualis admired how delicious the treat looked. They began eating and talked among themselves. Dark appreciated Leela's cooking. Qualis refuses to describe Arito's feat, and Dark thinks some things are better left unsaid, but the boy still wants the reward for winning. The research took a long time, and Dark gave Arito his share of 7 million yen. That is a significant cashback. All of the Girika's transactions are recorded in the historical record. The adventurer apologized for the disturbance. Sierra reassured Arito. Qualis thanks the adventurer for the store. Dark is grateful too. The boy believes every girl he knows deserves his trust. Arito wants to tell Leela, Qualis, Sierra, and Dark that he has decided to be honest about his abilities. The boy told the girls everything, and they were thrilled. Quala asked if his story was a secret, since telling it could help business. The boy replied it would cause problems because he wanted to be an adventurer. Leela and Dark were delighted, but Sierra and Quala were shocked. Sierra asked why he had raised his item enhancement skill to S, and the boy said his base stats were low, so he had made the strongest gear that fit him. Suddenly Sierra, Dark, and Qualis began whispering behind Rito's and Leela's backs, making them uneasy. The girls turned and praised Arito, clearly delighted, and the boy thanked his acquaintances. The adventurer promised to do everything he could. Now even a dragon could kill him. The girls celebrated his departure, and his life as a craftsman went on smoothly. It hardly seemed worth giving up his trade. Morning's already here. The boys were noisy until late last night. Lilo is back in bed beside Arito. Qualis is nearby. Sarah asked Qualis sternly what she was doing there. Leela told her brother it was already morning. Lily said breakfast was ready, but Sierra and Qualis started arguing about it, making the morning very noisy. Dark said good morning, added that she had a lot of fun yesterday, and Arito was surprised to see her here too. Everyone gathered and sat down for breakfast. They all liked the food and found it delicious. They urged Leela to hurry because it was already late. As Lily prepared to leave, the boys wished her a good day, and Dark pointed out that Arito's sister was doing well in prep school and said they would be lost without Lily. They began talking to the boy about him becoming an adventurer. He admits he made a magic sword that barely reaches risk level. The boy tries to save money, but stronger weapons cost much more. Quali said upgrading and selling weapons doesn't pay off. Dark warned that unless Arito's stats are raised, Arito won't be able to use powerful weapons. Sierra added that combat skills are needed. The boy decided to upgrade and sell the materials he collected in battles. The dropped items weren't valuable, and killing demons let him raise his stats and save SB. The girls liked the idea. Dark was surprised by Arito's thoughtfulness. Quala admired his idea, and Sierra offered to help the adventurer. Arito said they were all good. Leela called her brother Arito at once, said she had left the assignment paper on the table, and asked him to bring it at lunch. The boy realized it would be bad if he didn't bring his sister the assignment paper, so he gave it to her. The girls wondered what Arito was doing with the Gillica. The adventurer said he had upgraded the Gillica to make calls and added a messaging feature to the Chaos map. He said messages are less noticeable than calls, so they are more convenient for communicating. You can contact people you've added as friends. Girls are delighted with these features. Dark noted it was very useful and convenient. Sierra emphasized Arito's special ability would soon appear, and the store owner added that the boy had a talent for creating new items. Quali suggested the adventurer try a few more of these items, and the boy thought the new product could be sold exclusively. Dark asks for an improved Gillica for herself. Sierra and Qualis also wanted upgraded cards, so the three girls handed their cards to a readout upgrade. The boy doesn't mind, but there's a catch. The adventurer began upgrading his familiar girl's Gillics, but something went wrong. Remembering her task, the boy decided to bring Lilo the documents. Some toys sat on the table. The adventurer looks for his sister's paper, finds a sheet listing adventure items, and understands why she went to Culis even though it was his duty. Arito believed he could be counted on, but he was far behind in knowledge and status, yet the boy did not give up and was ready to work hard. At last the adventurer infused chaos into everything and was able to strengthen the objects. The girls he knew supported him and celebrated Arito's success. The girls began testing the calling and messaging features. The boy hopes they will figure out the maps. Arito arrived on time at Riot Preparatory School, where his sister studies, and it is hard to believe that under the control of the Adventurers Guild students with good recommendations can pass without exams. At school, a man said Lilo's abilities were among the best ever. Admission standards can be changed easily, so work hard before the entrance exams. A sister runs to meet her brother, and he is proud of her. She apologized for bothering her, and the brother said it wasn't a problem. Leela asked why Arita was worried, and he asked who the girl beside her was. Lily assured the girl the adventurer would not harm her. The stranger said her name was Katarina. Arito returned the introduction and asked whether Katarina was his sister's friend. Lulu answered that Katarina is her friend, but is very shy. The boy cannot imagine how the girls get along since both are shy. The brother gave his sister the paper with the task. A stranger suddenly appeared, asked why the students were here with another stranger, and said she would call the guards. Lily told the stranger, whom she called Erica, that this was her brother. Erica eyed the boy suspiciously and asked whether he was human. A girl unknown to Arito flooded him with questions, convinced he had told Lilu to call him Big Brother. The boy said he didn't care what people said because they were brother and sister. Arito noticed Erica was nervous. Lilo explained her older brother had brought her something she had forgotten. Erica instructed the adventurer to leave immediately and to ask the students to return because they had another practical lesson after lunch. Erica scolded Katarina, reminded her of the elf's dignity, and warned that by asking for trouble she was getting what she deserved and should use her head. Katarina might not reach the intermediate level, so she should think carefully. Katarina apologizes to Erica while crying. The sensible girl kept yelling at Katarina because she started crying. Erica asks the crying girl to be mentally tougher next time. The angry girl runs off. Arito asks whether Katarina is okay. Her younger sister asked if Erica was a princess. Katarina was her childhood friend, but had a different status. Erica declined the throne for her brother and sister and became an adventurer to succeed on her own. Katarina said she studied with Erica at this prep school and added that the angry girl often worries about her. Arito suspected the angry girl wasn't saying it out of concern for Katarina. Then brother Leela asked his sister's friend why she couldn't reach the intermediate level. Practical training requires fighting the instructor. If your HP drops below a certain level during the fight, you fail the exam. It's harder for Katarina, so she's useless. Students can restore health, but Leela's friend cannot use magic because she is not agile enough and has trouble retreating. Arito realized the problem with taking restorative medicine. Lilo's brother gave his sister's friend an exclusive potion to help Katarina reach the intermediate level. The girl drank the potion. Arito went home after finishing his business. Lilu returned home. Her brother met Leela and asked how Leela's day had gone. Leela thanked her brother. Katarina said she passed on her first try thanks to her brother Lilo's advice and subjects. Sis said it was amazing, and she got it with one blow of a hammer. Sister Orito was surprised her friend understood so quickly because she couldn't have handled it herself. It turned out Leo's brother had used past life memories of the hammer to help his sister's friend. Katarina had never used an item like this before. The adventurer wanted to try an automatic recovery potion on someone. It triggers when HP drops to 50% and restores health automatically. Thanks to the girl's victory, Arito will better understand what the new potion is for. Leo thanked her brother, noting that Katarina and the restoration potion had passed the test. Leo's friend burst into tears. Tavarina earned congratulations for her success at the preparatory school, and even Erica offered a reluctant compliment. Arito sat in the Rignum tool shop among the potions and dozed off after yawning. Apologizing for the wait, the man in the apron said the test was complete, the potion was effective, and Arito was a true master of his craft. The man asked the boy to bring any amount of the tested product because it was now the store's top item, and Arito thought he was making a lot of money, while the store and its customers were happy with the new product. The shopkeeper thanked the boy for helping and paid for the adventurer's services. The map slipped from Arito's hands. The boy apologized for being distracted. The shopkeeper said the adventurer was overzealous. The worker worried the young man was having too much trouble. Arito looked sleepy and said everything was fine. He was enjoying it and getting paid directly. Sales were taking a long time, so the worker asked the boy to slow down. The adventurer promised to try, unsure how much he could create. Arito realized there would be too many goods. The man in the store said there was no point in torturing himself. The worker was glad the adventurer helped Katarina because she turned out to be his daughter. The boy asked how his daughter was doing. The man said it was all thanks to L.A. with the big sword. They had been training for a long time. The worker thanked Arito for introducing him to his little sister. The adventurer said Katarina always had potential, and the man said she was his daughter, adding that if Hirtu harmed her, he would not get away with it because her father would deal with him. The boy felt sleepy and dizzy, so he checked himself and found he was overtired. Unlike a debuff, this condition can't be cured with medicine or magic. Arito wants to do something about it. Overwork can lead to another illness, but the adventurer refuses to die from it, even though he shot down the dragon 3 times and nearly died. In normal circumstances, this would be impossible. The boy had enough to do today. Arito went into the store and thanked Sierra, the son who had met him, about working in the sales department. No buyers showed up. Sarah noticed the adventurer looked pale. Arito said he'd pushed himself too hard without realizing it. The boy felt heavy and feared dying again. Refusing to die, Arito suddenly sees a dragon carrying a bag and saying good morning to him. The boy looked surprised. The dragon asked the adventurer if he was tired, advising him not to push himself even if the task was important. The other dragon was frightened when Arito suddenly fell. Confused, the boy could not tell whether it was a dream or a fever. The dragons asked Arito if his stomach hurt or his head was spinning, and whether they had any drinks for tiredness. The boy felt déjà vu because there were 3 dragons. Clearly, the adventurer overworked himself. If the hallucinations are incurable, it might be easier for him to die. The dragons comforted the boy and promised to take care of him, and then Arito saw a dragon trying to feed him, insisting he needed to eat properly, but the boy said he was fine. The food looked appetizing, and Arito liked how it tasted. Koala said it wasn't overwork but just tiredness. The boy said she might be right. Everything seems different. It feels odd that things are so simple. If Arito had been overtired, he would have needed several days to recover. Sierra and Leela entered and apologized to Arito on Qualies for intruding. The boys confronted each other about Arito and Qualies after the two were accidentally seen together.